The Love Leadership Academy with Cindy Willcocks is a brand new podcast about dreaming big and living your best life. There is only now, this very moment in time. So let go of the past, avoid worrying about the future, and focus on being your authentic self.
So, hello, my name's Cindy Willcocks and I'm the Director of R10, Enriching the Next Generation. It's a community interest company, not-for-profit. And I'm here today to talk about the Love Leadership Academy and my work around the model of love leadership with a very lovely, smiley guest. If you can introduce yourself, lovely to have you here, Alessia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cindy. And of course, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me here. As we were just talking before starting the recording, Cindy and I haven't actually met in person yet, but it feels like we're so connected because Cindy joined one of our events in London last, when was it?
Last autumn, yeah. So Australia was the first time, and then we moved back to the UK, and then so we were in London last autumn. But you were busy,
and in the meantime, I had just given birth.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there. That's why I don't remember. Not like, I don't remember when she came, but I wasn't present, which is why we haven't actually ever met in person, but we have worked so much together through calls. I mean, isn't technology amazing these days? I always say, if what is happening right now, and if you are watching this, maybe, a few years later, you might not know, but we are actually recording this in the middle of a pandemic, where we are all kind of secluded in our homes since weeks, since months actually. So if this would have happened 10, 15 years ago, it would have been such a different experience. But thanks to technology, just like right now, we are connected. I'm coming live from the Bay Area, from Silicon Valley in California. And we're connected with Cindy in the UK, and it feels almost like we're in the same room. And that's just thanks to this amazing technology that, it's out there right now, and it's making our lives so much easier during this super intense experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's encouraged a lot of people that haven't been using technology, maybe to just, explore a bit more and actually get into technology a bit more, hasn't it?
That's right. Well, you asked me before to introduce myself, and of course, together with Kane, my husband, we run the #1 global business training company, Industry Rockstar, which you see the logo here. And one of the things that we are actually focusing on, especially right now, is really teaching small business owners how to start to really change their business in a way that incorporates more technology and more digital experiences, which has been really, really important for like the last 10 years, as technology became more and more important in our life. And now in the last few weeks, it's becoming like critical. It's like life or death situation right now for a business, right? So that's what we're really focusing on and really helping them. And of course, our whole model, as investors, is really through our trainings to source businesses that we can invest in and then partner with and grow together with.
It's excellent, and I love being part of Industry Rockstar, and I've really enjoyed meeting all of you, and I'm so grateful for you to talk with me today about the model of love leadership.
That's great. We love having you as part of the community too, Cindy.
Oh, that's great. So the model of love leadership is something that I put together. So I'm a mental health nurse, and I've been a mental health nurse for over 20 years. I've worked with trauma and people really. And, model of love leadership was about finding your way, really. So it was basically my journey and then how I helped other people through their journey. And I was kind of looking it back and thinking, like, how can I communicate this with people in a way that, will stay really clear for them? So I'm just totally in love with love and integrity and openness and honesty. I just love it. And so I knew it was going to be based on love. And I use LOVE as an acronym, so it stood for Listen, Own, Voice and Empower, as you know. And
yes, I totally love your system. It's so brilliant.
Thank you. So I just wanted people to just have something easy to remember so that they could live a healthy, happy life, because that's all there is, really. We're only here once. What else is there? So Yeah, it's that's what it means to me. So I wrote about it in my book, Draw a Heart Around It, a revolutionary mental health treatment for individuals and companies. A bit of a mouthful, and it's all about getting the message out there and enabling people just to be healthy and happy and be connected and just love and act with good intentions. So I'm really pleased that you're here to chat with me about that today. So I was going to kick off with the first question. So we're talking about listening. So can you remember a time where you actually felt listened to, and what impact did that have on you?
A time where I didn't feel listened to.
You did. Well, a time where you did feel listened to. Can you
remember? I did feel listened. A time where I did feel listened. Well, so that's a funny topic because first of all, we were just talking about the topic of being listened to with our daughter last night, and our daughter is 5.5 years old. And she started to become really frustrated at times. And of course, this whole lockdown situation of being, locked down at home and no friends and no school and no dance class and no swimming class didn't help. So sometimes she's really frustrated, and very often she says, "You're not listening to me." So yesterday, as she was having a little frustration with Kane, I said, "Kane, her biggest fear is to not being listened, to not being heard." And he was like, "No, that's impossible. Our daughter would never have that fear." And so we played a game with the ball. We said, okay, every time we throw the ball, we share one of our biggest fear. And when we throw it to her and she had to throw it herself, we said, okay, go, your biggest fear. And she was like, that you won't listen to me. And so that brought up so much conversation around being listened to, etc. And as I was sharing with her, one of my deepest experiences of being heard was actually when I met Kane, which is one of the things that actually really brought us together, was his ability to listen and his ability to have me feel, listened to, heard, understood, kind of gotten, and his great ability in communication in general. So when I think about that time where I felt listened, I remember these first few weeks where he would really, even in his busy day, both of us, we would really take that time to connect and to listen to each other as a way to communicate, first of all, that we cared, right? When we met, you must know, when we met, actually, I was living in Rome, Italy, and Kane was living in Sydney, Australia. So connecting and communicating wasn't the most natural and easiest thing to do, and it's not like we could just go out for a little dinner or a walk and connect and actually look at each other in the eyes and talk. So we used technologies just like we are using it right now. We were on Skype literally, I think, 23 hours out of the day, so much that he would fall asleep on Skype. He would fall asleep on Skype, and I used to work. I used to be in my office. When I met Kane, I used to run my tourist company in Italy, and I used to have my office with my desktop computer, and then I had my laptop computer that I would take with me, and that's where I used to have Kane on Skype. And at some point during my work day, it was nighttime in Australia, so he would fall asleep. And there he was on my desk in my office, sleeping. And as I would have my meetings, etc., he was just there kind of sleeping on my desk.
Beautiful story. That's so lovely.
But, in our busy days, Kane was traveling around, and I was traveling around, actually. I was running, a tourist company. And at that time, we were turning around 30 million euro a year. So we were very busy. We had over 100 people in our team, etc. So lots of stuff to manage. And actually, just when I met him, funny enough, I met him. He was in Europe, in Italy. Of course, that's how we met. He was speaking at a conference. And I was hoping we would have some time to hang out together since we had just met. Instead, 5 minutes. And then he left because he had another conference to go to. And that same week, he was actually spending the week in Italy, but I was leaving for India because I was taking a group of my best clients to India. And so now he was in Italy and I was in India, and we had to connect through like Skype and Facebook Messenger and all these crazy things. So definitely, the intentionality of actually really, being committed to connecting, communicating, listen to each other in order to get to know each other and deepen that connection that we had, very strong from the moment we met. But again, we had only 5 minutes really to explore it in person. So just the time to essentially exchange emails and Skype information. And that was it. It was really just, totally soulmate recognition. But then there were a lot of gaps to kind of feel. So we did that a lot through Skype, etc. And the communication wasn't that easy, even because at that time I did not speak English. And Kane, to this day still, don't tell me, but to this day still, he does not speak Italian. He will tell you he can, but he can't. So the communication was definitely a little bit complex. And there was a lot of commitment and a lot of real, really showing up for the other person and making sure that we would feel heard and understood and gotten, although there were all these, complexities. So we would connect, even if it was in the, nighttime for one of us, and we were committed to understand each other, even if we needed to use, Google Translator and dictionaries and whatever. But, we would kind of stick to it until we really understood the other person. And it was so beautiful, so, so different from what very often we do in our everyday life where everybody's busy. And you actually, even though you speak the same language, but you do have the perception that the other person is, kind of listening to you, but not really hearing what you're saying, not really committed to get to the depth of your message, of your story, of who you are and what you want to communicate.
That's a lovely, beautiful story, and thank you for sharing it, because it's a really good example of, the power of listening and how people can be connected. It's not just about the words, it's about, listening to your intuition, listening to your gut, listening to what you're saying inside yourself, knowing when not to listen as well. When they kind of negative thoughts creep in, no, we don't want any of those, out they go. So listening is so powerful, and that's a very good example of the power of love for you.
That's right, love leadership.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Amazing. So how does that compare, that experience of feeling listened to, how does that compare to not feeling listened to? And how do you get yourself heard?
Great topic. So I actually, I have a past of being in very male-dominated industries doing business, and sometimes in cultures or doing business with cultures where having a woman, especially a young woman, I was running my tourist company and I was still in my 20s. So having a 26, 27-year-old woman coming and maybe negotiating, a big deal wasn't actually very, it wasn't very common. And not everybody was open to that and used to that. And, sometimes it was a bit weird. I remember actually I was kind of telling Rania, in a way that she could understand, but as we were talking about being listened to, etc., and how to take accountability for ourselves, but at the same time, the things that we can control, like how, other people need to take their accountability. And so, how to manage that whole dynamic. And I was telling her that I think it was 2009 when I was negotiating one of the biggest deals that I negotiated for my tourist company, which was we were taking over a whole resort in Egypt. And so one of the people on my team who was actually leading the department, as a tourist company, we were divided in different departments based on the destination. So he was actually leading the Middle East and Egypt kind of development of our company. And so he sourced this resort and researched it, etc. But then, of course, as the moment approached where we had to make a choice, he brought me in as the decision maker. So we flew to Egypt, and we had a meeting with the owner of this resort. And of course, the owner was a man, an Egyptian man, and he was definitely very, very used to doing business with men. So much that as we were sitting there, if I would speak, if I would say something, if I would voice a concern, ask a question, he wouldn't even answer to me. And if he would speak, he would always speak, to my guy there, which was super weird. And he felt so embarrassed. And I was trying to explain, it has nothing to do with you. And, it's just, obviously his way, and he has obviously, he's used to do business in a certain way. It's nothing to do with us. It's just like, and we won't be able to change it either. It's just, the way he feels more comfortable talking and communicating. And so for the purpose of this deal, we're better just, working inside of his dynamic. If not, it would become just very, very difficult, to communicate and to find a middle ground. But I remember him feeling very, very, kind of embarrassed. My manager and the guy there totally not understanding what was going on, and I was trying to, kind of put everybody together. But at the same time, it made me think a lot about, what a complex situation was for me to manage internally, of really having the experience of not feeling heard, like actually expressing a thought, expressing a question, expressing a concern, and having, that not addressed directly, but actually sometimes then answered back to somebody else, which was very, very weird. And of course, it was not the only time I had it happen. Same thing happened to me as we were actually just after meeting Kane. So as I was going through that such an intense experience of being heard with Kane, at the same time I was traveling through India, where again we had a local interface that was a man. And I was traveling, we were taking all our best clients to India because we were starting to promote India as a destination. It was new for our business. And so I had my business partner was with me. And he's a man, and he ended up taking over the company after I moved to Australia. But at that time, he was my business partner. He had just come into the company, and we were going through India, and we had our local partner there. And again, he would just talk to my partner, to Johnny. He wouldn't actually talk to me. And for us, we used to have, we were so like, I don't know, so not used to that we were trying to understand how to fit that all in, because we actually had a specific schedule, and there were some presentation that I had to do, etc. And this guy was very, very, very committed to only talk to Johnny. So we always needed to make sure that, he was present. And it was such an interesting dynamic to have, at the same time, in the same, temporal experience, this strong experience of connecting with Kane and feeling heard and understood, and really like the presence, not only of, listen to somebody, but really being present and committing to hearing what's being said and communicated. And on the other hand, instead, at the same time, having an experience of somebody that, would just not being able to connect with me and hear me and actually have a direct conversation with me, but wanted to go through my business partner at that time. So it was really an interesting, a very interesting, experience. And I was sharing that with Rania yesterday, because I was saying, need to take accountability about us actually, creating our own experiences. But at the same time, if somebody is not ready to listen to us, we need to make sure that they can have their own experience. Like, everybody needs to be able to create their own experience. So you need to take accountability for yours. And at the same time, you need to kind of, let go of trying to control everybody else's experience and what everybody else is doing, which is very complex as a, it's a complex paradox to actually, kind of work with a 5.5-year-old, which says, if I need to create my own reality, then I'm going to try to control everybody else, what they're doing, so that I can have the reality that I want. And then we are like, well, but you need to let go as well, because everybody needs to do the same. And she's like, how do I create my reality if I can't control what they're doing? And so we started to, talk more about, the fact that, things happen around us, but the way we respond and what we believe about them and how we feel about them is really what's giving us our experience, not so much what other people are doing. So that was our conversation at bedtime just last night. So it's interesting to have this conversation with you today.
It's great because I think sometimes as adults we sometimes forget how to talk with children and young people. So I've worked in the NHS, I've run child and adolescent mental health services, and spoke with a lot of parents and carers and services that are working with children and young people. And I think sometimes as adults we forget how to communicate with them. And one of the biggest things, particularly now with the pandemic, talking about what's going on, not just letting it happen around and all these adults running around and everything's changing and no one explaining it to children and young people. It's the same sort of thing. So it's really lovely to hear that you're having those deep conversations with Rana. It just
deep conversations are like our everyday bread here in this house. I think sometimes our kids are like, can you just not tell us like other parents do? Do we really have to discuss everything? And I'm like, yes, we have to. Because that's how you grow, right?
Yeah. Good. Oh, well, thanks for sharing. They're great stories and great things to hear about. And I think it really connects with, so when I think about love leadership, I said the first thing that I put into the love leadership model, it's an acronym. L is for listen, and then O is for own. And when I'm talking about own, I'm talking about, you've already really touched on it, like remembering your roots, knowing who you are, knowing who's showing up in any conversation, taking responsibility and accountability, those things. And I just wondered, for you, what was the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome to own your stuff?
Well, I think that for like for most of us, one of the biggest challenge is really to kind of heal some of our sometimes childhood trauma, which, it's not like trauma because we, somebody wanted to do something kind of traumatic to us, but because as children, sometimes we process information, emotions, and what's going around us in a very, very extreme way. And so for me, it definitely, I know that there was a time, I don't have that much the narrative of I'm not heard, but I have the I'm not loved one. And I know that really comes from my father. And as I was growing up, my father was working all the time. I tell the story in all of our events. You were actually not there when I was telling it last time in London, and I wasn't there when you were in the event. So we kind of missed each other in that. But normally I tell my story. And a part of my story is that I grew up in a family where my parents were running their own business. And my dad specifically was super committed to the business. Now, of course, today I can see that he was committed to the business as, a way to take care of us, a way to show his love, a way to give us different opportunities that he had. Both my parents come from super poor families. Started their business with nothing, like literally no money at all. And for many years, they struggled. I was telling to Kane just a few nights ago, as I was putting Rania to bed, I don't know how I had this, memory popping up of me as a little girl. And we would spend part of our summer in the apartment where my dad grew up, which is outside of Rome. So kind of like in a very nice area, but the apartment is very, very small. And at that time, it was still exactly in the same way that, my grandparents used it, it was a 1-bedroom apartment. And we would go there for holiday. It was my parents and I, plus my grandparents. So my parents would give the only bedroom, the main bedroom, but that was the only one, to my grandparents. They would sleep in the living room, and I would have a fold up, sofa bed, like a chair bed actually, in a hallway. And so my parents actually, as I was growing up, they were still experiencing a lot of challenges financially. So that was, really frustrating for them. And that made it that my dad was constantly working because he wanted to get out of that situation. Of course, he wanted to do it because he loved us so much. But as a little girl, what I was, watching was just that he had never time. So he would never take time to, I don't know, watch a movie with me, take me to the park, or take me for a walk, teach me how to go, I don't know, on a bike, whatever. Right? These things that I would see other dads do with their girls. So my narrative internally was, well, my dad is not doing that because I'm not important and, he doesn't love me. If not, he would do that. And again, of course, I know as an adult that wasn't the case, but it took me a lot of, a very long journey internally, studying with great people and really trying to understand, again, beliefs and dynamics that were running things inside of myself in order to really heal that part, heal that little girl that felt not important and not loved. Yeah. So I think that's one of the most important things, because if not, up to the point where I was able to actually really see what had happened and take even accountability for creating the experience that I had experienced, instead of saying, well, it's because my dad was doing that. Well, actually, he was doing what he was doing, and I could have interpreted it in many different ways. I chose my story. I chose the way I wanted to experience it. Until I was able to do that, I wasn't actually able to really own my stuff in any other part of my life either.
Yeah. And I like, it's really great that you share that, Alessia, because I think for so many of us, we have our stories and things show up for us. We don't always know why they're showing up, or why we're behaving, or why there may be a dynamic or something that we don't see, or maybe we get stuck in patterns of behavior that we don't even know how to undo because we can't even see
them. Right.
And I think that what's really great is, listening to how you've taken your experiences and used your experiences for you. It's very empowering, and it's something that I talk about as part of the model of love leadership as well, owning your stuff. And, I believe that any experience is a good experience. It's what you do with that experience. It doesn't have to define who you are. It's what you do with that and how you use that to create your healthy, happy life. And it sounds like you've done exactly that. So in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of our work, even in business. I mean, a lot of what we help business owners do is really look at where their experiences come from and how are they actually creating them, right? Because every experience, we create that, and it tells our story more than everybody else's, and it actually defines the trajectory of our story into the future. So if we want to change our results into the future, we need to start to change the story that we tell ourselves about what is going on and how are we perceived and how do people see us. So that's a lot of what we decode for entrepreneurs, and we help them actually change that internal narrative so that they can then create different stories for their futures.
Amazing. It's brilliant. It's great stuff. So I'm just thinking about, so we talked about listen and we talked about own, and the next thing in love leadership is have a voice and don't be afraid to use it. And it's connected with listening because obviously if you've got a voice and you're not afraid to use it, it means other people have got a voice and they shouldn't be afraid to use it. And it's about knowing when to use that and how to use that with good intentions. So, I believe in being kind, as do you and your community. And I think, you can say things to challenge and support people. You don't always have to be in line with what the same opinions as someone else. You can have difference and it can be okay, and everyone can live happily ever after. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. But I think in terms of thinking about voice, can you ever recall a time where, you've been afraid or you felt challenged to be able to use your voice?
Well, let me just tell you that when I was 16 years old, again, it's been a huge journey, and it's very interesting as, very often looking back and putting together all the dots that you weren't able to connect, let's say, as you were, walking that path. But when I was 16 years old, I lost my voice.
Okay.
For over 6 months.
Wow.
Talking about owning your voice.
Yeah.
So I was super shy. I was totally very, very reserved. And I was definitely, I had a very big challenge with with owning my voice and owning ideas that were in conflict with somebody else, like kind of owning my truth when it wasn't, aligned with what, everyone else's truth. So much that at some point I lost my voice. There was nothing physical going on. I got all sorts of physical, kind of assessments and checkups. And everything was fine. It was really emotional. It was related. It happened when my grandfather died, when he passed away. So it was, I think, a very big moment of kind of transition for me. So when he passed away, I essentially lost my voice for 6 months and more. And funny enough, I found it again. So throughout those 6 months, at some point, I was 16 and I had a plan to spend a semester abroad in Switzerland, living in Italy. I went to a Swiss school. So I had a plan to spend a semester in Switzerland, and everybody told me, well, obviously you're not doing it right now. I mean, with no voice, where are you going, right? And I said, no, I can't have this stopping me. So I actually went anyway. And it turned out I found my voice again, like, what a beautiful metaphor, as I was actually away from home and kind of finally finding myself away from, all the entanglement of my family. So as I was exploring myself in that new dynamic, I found my voice again.
Amazing. That is a very
good... It was a very, very interesting thing to think about. I mean, not that everybody needs to be so extreme, but obviously I've chosen very often extreme ways in my life to experience things, and that was one. But it was such an interesting, a very interesting experience, because as a 16-year-old, I remember that one of the things that I started to observe was how many words do we say that are actually not really necessary? Like, how can we actually communicate what we want to communicate, sometimes with no words or with way less words? And how, if you're really, I mean, when you take away one of our senses, of course, all the other ones kind of become much more developed. And so by not being able to talk, to express myself, my ability, I mean, I'm always being very kinesthetic, and that ability definitely grew a lot. And so very often when I was communicating with somebody, I could get what they were saying. Like at some point, I was like, I could actually really switch into their experience. And I felt like words were sometimes almost creating barriers instead of bridges between people. It was a very interesting experience as a 16-year-old to observe all that. And really being present of how words are so important, and you can use them in they can be very powerful, but as well sometimes they can be again, they can create more barriers, because you can use words to actually hide things instead of really communicating them in an open way.
Yeah, true. That's really true. And what an experience to to learn that at such an early age as well. It's pretty amazing.
Right. But again, I mean, I remember, I have a few fun things, but I remember a lot of things, like at 16 years old, finding yourself without a voice in a time where technology, again, wasn't, you couldn't just call an Uber, for example, if you were somewhere. You had to actually call a taxi. I mean, in Europe, we don't drive at 16 years old. So we start to go out, but we are not able to drive yet. So normally we need to either be picked up or call a taxi or something like that. Now, I remember one time calling a taxi, I had been out with some friends, and I called the taxi to be picked up, and the woman couldn't actually listen, couldn't hear me, because I had no voice. I would talk like this. But they were not my friends and family now, they were kind of they were expecting that. So they were really listening for that. But imagine calling a taxi, company, talking like this. The woman was like, "What? I can hear you. Okay, bye." And I was like, "What?" So I had to actually text my mom or a friend other times and say, "I am here. Please send a taxi," because they won't hear me. Yeah. So it was a very interesting, experience, that whole thing.
So, if there was something that you would say to yourself, from as you now, if you could tell your old self something, or anyone in that situation, what would it be? You were talking about thinking about your words and using your words. Is there anything else that you would say to someone that was experiencing that?
Yeah, so one thing that I've learned a lot over the last, I'm going on 8 years of knowing Kane and being in a relationship with Kane. And sometimes we say we're almost like the same person in a feminine and a kind of masculine body. But really, we have some things that are very different as well. And one of the things is that, I have a very Italian proper background. So it's very like showing up perfectly and fashionable. And, like if it's not perfect, it's better that you are not seen at all. Funny. And of course, being with Kane, the whole experience has been really about starting to disconnect from like looking good and what other people think, instead really following your mission, your purpose, and showing up not because people need to like you or not because you want to look good, but really because you have a message, you have a mission, and you are on track to actually follow your mission and help the people that want to be helped. I mean, I remember again in this whole situation of me coming out, for my mom, to these days. I mean, my mom is here. She's on lockdown with us. She's actually, my dad is a very high risk group because he's in his 70s and he has heart problems and diabetes problems and whatever. So they have been actually isolating themselves in our master bedroom.
That's a story.
Because of course, if your parents decide to self-quarantine in your home, you give them the best room and the biggest, etc. So we gave them our master bedroom. So they're there and they are completely isolated. Nobody sees them. They don't even open the door. But if my mom connects with me, you see that she has her hair done and her makeup done, and she's completely like dressed up like she would go, to a charity dinner every single day. And that's just how I got, brought up. And my mom is like, oh my gosh, like you can't be without makeup one day. Like she would not even go grocery shop without her makeup. And so that's how I grew up, right? So much about showing up perfectly and showing up always kind of put together and properly, like, in everything, of course. And then I went to a Swiss school where it was all about really being inside, more internally, really structured and really prepared and really. And here I am meeting my husband from like Silicon Valley, where it's all about, let's just make it happen. Who cares if it's a mess? It's just like, woo, startup mode, right? I moved to California in 2014, 7 months pregnant. I went through the last months of pregnancy here. I gave birth. I'm a mess. Now suddenly I don't even recognize my body. I gained so much weight. And that's the moment where my husband walks into the room and says, hey, I set up a video studio upstairs because we have to record videos for our global tours. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like right now? He's like, well, it needs to happen right now. People are waiting for us. I was like, oh. So we ended up recording those videos with me like 30 pounds overweight in the middle of the night, just after having given birth, like, with like my eyes looking like I didn't sleep in years, which, I just didn't sleep in months, but still. And not only, we used those videos in the moment. And then of course, in the meantime, we got so busy, etc. So every time I was like, can we re-record those videos, please? Because now it's years later, and those videos are still being used so much that I used to show up to our own events all around the world. We do events in 32 different countries, and I would show up, and people would arrive at the door. We're normally always at the door greeting people and shaking hands when the door opened, and people would come in and say, oh my gosh, you look so much better than your videos. I'm like, yes, I know. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But yeah, that's one thing that I would tell to my younger self is like, care less about what everybody else thinks and just follow your dreams, follow your mission, follow your purpose, like be in action instead of waiting for the perfect time. That's one of the things that I've learned more in the last 7 years. Nothing has been perfect in the last 7 years. And yet I think that, we have made, one of the biggest, we have actually experienced one of the biggest evolution, both personally and professionally in our lives.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great advice. I love it, love it, love it. It's good, yeah. And it's brilliant and very. So it takes us to our next point is around the love leadership model is empowerment, empower. It's listen, own, voice, and empower. And that sounds like a very empowering thing. Just to be
It is.
And not care about what anyone thinks, and just do what you want and be who you want to be. And it's a very important message. So just thinking about empower. When I talk about empowering the model of love leadership, I talk about engaging and educating both yourself and others. So it's twofold, and that's about evolving. It's about change. And I think sometimes people get scared of change. You'll know this in the work that you do and the relationships that you have. People get scared by change. They're scared of uncertainty and the not knowing. We've seen like a lot of anxieties during this pandemic as well. And I think when I talk about empowerment, I just wonder what it means to you. So how do you know that you're feeling empowered? What does empowerment mean to you? How do you know that you're empowered?
So again, that's a very interesting question. And of course, I like your definition of empowerment connected to education and engagement. And what does empower mean is a deep thought, a big conversation, a big question for me. First of all, one of my biggest passions is sales. And I always feel like, my whole methodology is all about, making sure that we empower the person that we are talking to, our potential client or potential partner. Like the whole process is about empowering them so that they can arrive to make a choice that is actually a reflection of themselves, what they want, etc. So how do we empower them? How do we know that they're empowered? What do we need to do to empower them? And then at the same time, of course, again, we are raising kids, and that's a big part of my life, which is why I refer to that so much. Because, right now, my little 5.5-year-old is definitely, the one that I'm more connected to all these conversations, because Liam is just 11 months. So although I know we think about how do we empower him, but we can't have an exchange with him yet. And so very often I think, how do we know that we're really empowering her, and what can we do to empower, and can we do something to empower her, or is the empowerment something that needs to be self-discovered, so she needs to create that for herself? And I think there is very often we work with paradoxes where we have two sides of one story. Both, we hold them both as truth, and we try to balance them. And in this case, I think that definitely empowerment is something that needs to be self-discovered. Like nobody can empower somebody else. We need to empower ourselves. It's something that we need to experience for ourselves. And at the same time, we can do something to help people discover that experience inside of their reality. And now I like, again, your education and engagement. And I would add 1/3 E for me, which is really empathy and the emotional engagement that I think it's very important. If I look at myself, if I look at my daughter, if I look at our clients, if I look at our students when they engage, I think that emotional part is very important. Really empathetically connect, emotionally connect with other human beings, so that we are not just educating them, we're not just engaging them in a mechanical way, but we're really emotionally and empathetically connecting with them. Because I feel like that's really where we create a landscape that feels safe to discover that empower experience for ourselves.
Yeah, great answer. I love it. Great. More people to empower, help them discover it themselves. Great. Okay, so for you, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned, either professionally or personally or both? Like, is there something that sticks out for you in terms of a lesson for you, a life lesson?
Well, I think it's connected to what we were sharing before, and it's a little bit about kind of being okay with making mistakes. Again, I come from I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo. I grew up in a Swiss school for 14 years. Like everything was about kind of being perfect, or at least like trying to be as perfect as possible. And therefore, this goes along with kind of avoid mistakes like at any cost. And sometimes this drives actually lack of action, because you are so focused on avoiding the mistake that you're actually not moving forward as fast as you could because you're too scared of making mistakes. And so there was at some point, I've actually met a person I feel like in one of my past lives, I met a very important person for my spiritual and personal kind of growth. And one important thing that this person shared with me was like, you will mess up and it will be okay. You will mess up and you will say sorry, and it will be okay. But it's part of life. Like, you can't avoid mistakes. You can't avoid, like, that would not be a human experience. So if you're looking for that, you will look forever, like waiting forever for the opportunity to do something with like the guarantee of not making a mistake, because that will never happen. You will be there waiting for that forever and never take action. And that's how I changed my experience of myself and my life. And I started to be like, well, I mean, let's try things out. And if I make a mistake, if I mess up something, like, I will say sorry. I will try to make it good again for people. But in the meantime, we will all move forward in our experiences.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great thing for people to hear, actually. And I think sometimes we keep those sorts of things internal. So when I'm talking about listening, I'm also talking about like an internal dialogue that people sometimes don't want anyone else to know about themselves. And I think to hear from people like yourself about things that are personal to you, and actually you've experienced it, is really important, because I think that will enable people to try things out and not worry if they make a mistake or get things wrong.
And when we look at very important, like at people that have actually driven a lot of change, innovation, growth in our culture, in our society, or just for themselves, like somebody that we actually admire, very often we notice that they have been in action. And if we look at their history, there are a lot of failures or things that could be perceived as failures, and they have just taken them as feedback to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
So one of the differences is really that a lot of people let the fear of making a mistake stopping them, while when you get really just committed to growth and evolution, you move forward. Knowing that you will make mistakes, you will crash something and break something, and you will fix it as fast as you can. But it's kind of like it's part of being humans, and therefore it's okay. That's why again, and of course, having a little child is such a great experience to actually kind of think about all these things and how do you want them to experience themselves and have connection. And so I remember 2 years ago, we took Rania ice skating for the very first time. Now, we don't live in an ice skating heaven. I mean, we're in California, so we barely have a few ice rinks, in the winter, which they melt and like they're definitely not perfect. When Corey, my sister-in-law, comes from Chicago, she's like, how can they even, ice skate here? The ice is all melted. It is what it is, right? So definitely Rania didn't have like this, amazing ice skating experience, but she loved it so much. She spent like 2 hours. And now I come from Rome. I've never ice skated my whole life, so I could be zero help to her. And there she was, 3 years old. She definitely had it in her genes because, of course, growing up in Chicago, Kane and Corey and their family, they all ice skated forever. But she was alone with me, never put skates on my feet before. Now, I broke my spine when I was younger, so my doctor is like, you're never going to ice skate, especially since you will need to learn right now and you can't afford it. So she tried for 2 hours, and of course, guess what? Like, she was constantly falling at the beginning. And there was a moment where I could feel like she was a little bit frustrated and she was kind of losing interest because she felt like, what's the point if I'm always falling? And so I called her and said, Rania, you're doing such a great job. And I just wanted to know something. She said, what, Mom? I said, falling is part of the game. And the fact that you fall is because you're trying new things, and it's such a great thing. So falling is totally part of the game. And she was so excited about that. So she went back out and she kept trying new things. And every time she would fall, she would look at me and she would say, Mama, falling is part of the game.
Oh.
And that actually got her to experience so much more. And an hour later, she was actually able to start to ice skate around without falling as much. And she was so proud of herself. And I thought she would have missed that experience if the fear of falling and looking bad, there were other kids, of course, around, and kids are a little bit self-conscious about. If she would have let that stopping her, she would have never gotten to actually, have that improvement and experience that pride about herself.
Amazing. I love that phrase. Falling is part of the game. I'm going to put it on a slide. Share it with people. Falling is part of the game. It's a good,
right.
Good phrase. I like it.
It's our mantra now, because now, of course, we can map that experience to anything else that she does, right? Now she's learning to read, and sometimes she's a little bit self-conscious about that. She's super proud, but then a little new word comes up, and she, doesn't want to look bad. And I'm like, look, Rania, you remember falling is part of the game, but making mistakes is part of the game. Like, if you're making mistakes, that you're trying new things, and that's great. Yeah. So she's like, okay. Falling is part of the game.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing those stories, and thank you for talking about love leadership with me. And again, like thinking about listen, own, voice, and empower. You've shared some really great examples, and hopefully people that are listening to this will take some things from this and think about how they can shape what they're doing to live healthy and happy lives. So just thinking about love leadership, do you think the model of love leadership could be useful in business? And if so, how?
Oh, totally. I mean, I feel like it can help so much, both business owners and, of course, like leaders of organizations and managers, etc. I mean, so much about leading a team. And again, if I remember as well, when I was leading a team of 100 people in plus at just 20 years old. So it was such the beginning and such a great journey for me in exploring my communication, my leadership. And it was the first time I looked at all these things. Yeah. And I feel like, the love leadership really summarizes a lot of the things that I had to learn in order to be able to lead properly. And again, it was a great journey. And I wish I would have somebody just coming and say, these are the really, the four main things that you need to pay attention to. And it would have shortened my journey so much in terms of, getting to some successful leadership skills. So I think it can be very, very useful. I think it's a great, listening and owning your experiences. And, there are all things that are so important, again, as leaders, whether you are leading in your own business or leading in somebody else's organization. It's important to be able to really communicate in a clear way. And this is all kind of working in the background, the way you can listen, the way you can feel experience being listened to, the way you own your experience. These are all things that, again, work in the background of actually you being able to then communicate effectively to other people as well.
Definitely. And I love that. I love that kind of feedback. So thank you for that. It's brilliant. And it's nice to hear that from you. And, yours and my journeys, we've both had journeys. It would be great. And if I hadn't gone on the journey, I wouldn't have known about love leadership, is what I think. And, same for you. Your path has been led by your experiences, and it's great. And if we can do things along the way to help other people work things out a lot quicker, then isn't that a wonderful thing doing? And I love that. It's great. I talk about love leadership as being conducting yourself as a leader of you. So of you first and then others. So, and it doesn't mean to say you can't.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, so I've got one final question for you, and I don't know if there's a one person answer to this or not. It might be a many people. But who do you admire the most and why?
Well, I would say definitely there are different people in different areas. So, that's a very open-ended question. So there are different people in different areas, for different reasons. Of course, I admire my, some of my biggest role models and earliest role models have been my parents, running their business and really creating a role model where there was none for them, both, from their family and even culturally. It was very kind of like a new a new pathway that they were designing for themselves. I mean, again, they chose to be in a travel business. They had zero experience in that. Their family didn't know anything about that. None of their family members all had kind of like small businesses, but nobody had ever built a team and worked in partnership with their spouses in this way. So I think like a lot of what I've seen as a child of them kind of working out things for themselves and really being committed to that partnership, both personally and in business, has shaped who I have become. Although, there's been a moment where I've said, I never want to run a business with my husband. Like I want to find a husband that I don't work with. Obviously that didn't work out very well. Needless to say, family, dynamics are very strong. So that did happen. But that brings me to the second, if I consider my parents kind of like one entity in this case, because I look at them, and of course they have different things that I admire about them. But then the second entity is definitely Cain, being really, he's definitely somebody that I look up to. His commitment, his passion, and his commitment not only to the business, not only to the transactional part of business, but really the relational part, the connection to people, the commitment to creating an experience, the commitment to run a business together, even when it's very complex sometimes. I mean, having, 2 kids now, plus of course Ken has a son from a previous marriage. So we have, 2 kids that we manage all day long, but then, for a big part of our time, we have a third child too. And that's, just all is very complex. And it makes the partnership very complex, even more so in a moment like this with lockdown and school closed and, and just a lot to manage. And the commitment to actually work it out together, no matter what happens, whether it gets tough, whether it's easy, whether it's fun, whether it's intense sometimes. I mean, of course, as business owners, we go through all sorts of experiences, but that commitment is always there.
Amazing. Thank you. So thank you for not only welcoming me into the community and helping me with some things, which you are. I thank you for talking with me about love leadership and your experiences. It's really great to hear from you, and I'm hoping to be sharing these.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. I love the conversation.
Oh, amazing. It's great. So you can get your own back if you want. If you've got any questions for me, you may not have, but if you have, now's your chance.
My question to you, well, what is the one thing that you would tell to your younger, the younger version of yourself? What is the one kind of life lesson that you have learned through this whole journey?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, isn't it? Like being able to go back and let ourselves know something. Yeah, I think it would have to be just be you. I love the lovers, I love the haters. It's great. I love it. Just be you. Don't be afraid to try new things. Like you said, don't be afraid to get things wrong, make mistakes. Yeah, I just think just be you. Be happy, be you.
Awesome, I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time, Alessia. I've kept you a bit longer than I expected to, but thank you. It's been brilliant.
Thank you.
Lots of love to you. Thank you for being part of the Love Leadership Academy, and hopefully we'll be able to spread more love in the world.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be able to spread more love in the world in person soon. We are doing it remotely, we're doing it digitally, but I can't wait until the time where you're able to actually be in person, shaking hands, hugging people, impacting people, with our physical in-person energy.
Totally. Thank you, Alessia. Much love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've listened to a podcast by the Love Leadership Academy with Cindy Willcocks. Thank you for listening, and to learn more about the model of love leadership, search online for Draw a Heart Around It, a revolutionary mental health treatment for individuals and companies, written by Cindy Willcocks. Dream big and live your best life.